The cowboy named Rumble had not spoken to a human in 20 years, but he spoke to storms. He could hear thunder not as noise, but as deep growls that formed complete sentences in his skull. The thunder told him when a calf would die and when a drought would break and when his mother would pass. Rumble predicted every disaster in the county, but no one believed him because he was called crazy. He retreated to his remote Montana ranch and listened to storms alone on his porch every night. A deaf meteorologist named Whisper studied weather patterns and noticed that one rancher's predictions were never wrong. She drove to his ranch with a notebook and a tablet and knocked on his cabin door at dusk. Rumble opened the door and saw her signing, and he shook his head because he did not know her language. Whisper typed on her tablet, "I am deaf. You predict storms better than any computer." "How?" Rumble typed back, "The thunder tells me. It speaks like a grandfather with a bad temper and a soft heart." Whisper smiled because she had never met anyone stranger or more honest in her entire career. She asked to stay for 1 week, and Rumble agreed because she smelled like rain and did not mock him. That night, a storm rolled in from the mountains, and Rumble sat on the porch with his eyes closed. Whisper sat beside him and felt the thunder through the wooden planks vibrating against her bare feet. Rumble began to speak aloud, and Whisper watched his lips move in the flashes of lightning. He said, "The thunder says a man from the north will lose his barn tomorrow. Tell him to tie his roof." Whisper typed the warning and sent it to the county alert system, and a barn was saved at dawn. She looked at Rumble with wonder and typed, "You really hear them. You are not crazy. You are a living barometer." Rumble read her words, and his eyes filled with tears because no one had ever believed him without proof. He typed back, "The thunder also said you would come. It said a woman with silent ears would save me from dying alone." Whisper felt her heart crack open because she had spent 40 years feeling broken by her own silence. She typed, "Save you from what? You are not dying. You are healthy and strong, and maybe just very lonely." Rumble took her hand and placed it on his throat and said aloud so she could feel his vocal cords vibrate. He said, "The thunder told me I have 1 year left before a storm takes me. It showed me my own death." Whisper felt the rumble in his throat and read his lips, and her face went pale as the lightning. She typed with shaking fingers, "Then we will prove the thunder wrong. I will study you and find a way to save you." Rumble shook his head and typed, "No one outruns a prophecy. But I can choose how I spend my last year." He looked at her and typed, "Will you stay? I have been listening to storms alone for 20 years. I want to listen to you." Whisper nodded because she had never felt so seen by a man who could not hear her voice and did not need to. She moved into his guest cabin, and every night they sat on the porch and felt storms together through the wood. Rumble would translate the thunder's warnings, and Whisper would type them to the county and save lives weekly. People stopped calling him crazy and started calling him the storm prophet, but he did not care about their approval. He only cared about Whisper's hand on his throat as she read his lips during the loudest thunderclaps. One night, a massive storm approached with winds that bent the cottonwood trees nearly to the ground. Rumble listened, and his face turned white, and he grabbed Whisper's hands and said, "The thunder says tonight is my night." Whisper shook her head violently and typed, "No, I will not let you die. Tell me where the storm will hit hardest." Rumble pointed to a small valley 3 miles east, where an old rancher lived alone with his livestock. Whisper typed the evacuation order, and emergency services moved the old man and his animals to safety. The storm destroyed the valley house, but no one died, and Rumble stood on his porch still breathing. He looked at the sky and whispered, "The thunder lied. Or it changed its mind. Why would it spare me?" Whisper grabbed his face and typed, "Because I asked it to. I prayed to every cloud and every bolt and every silence." Rumble wept and said aloud, "You cannot pray to thunder. Thunder does not listen. Thunder only speaks." She placed his hand on her chest so he could feel her heartbeat and typed, "Then let me be your thunder. Listen to me now. He felt her heart pounding against his palm and realized that her silence was louder than any storm he had ever heard. Rumble asked her to marry him on the porch as the storm retreated and the stars emerged one by one. He said aloud so she could read his lips, "I have 1 year or 50 years, but I want them all with you," translating my crazy. Whisper laughed and typed, "You are not crazy. You are the only man who ever listened to the sky so he could listen to me." She said yes, and they got married in the same field that the storm had spared because of his warning. Their wedding guests were the ranchers he had saved, and they no longer whispered crazy behind their hands. Rumble wore a simple gray suit, and Whisper wore a white dress, and they signed their vows to each other. His written vow said, "I spent 20 years listening to thunder. Now I will spend forever listening to your silence because it is kinder." Her written vows said, "You taught me that sound is not the only voice. Your heart speaks louder than any storm I have ever felt." They danced their first dance to no music because Whisper could not hear it, and Rumble only listened to thunder. Instead, they swayed to the vibration of their feet on the wooden floor and the distant rumble of a faraway storm. After 1 year, Rumble was still alive, and the thunder had not taken him as it had promised. He asked the next storm why it lied, and the thunder growled, "The silent woman changed your fate. We cannot see her prayers." Rumble ran to Whisper and told her, and she typed, "Then I will pray every night for the rest of our lives." They lived on the Wives Ranch for 30 more years, and Rumble's predictions never failed, but he stopped predicting his own death. Whisper learned to feel thunder through the ground and could predict storms almost as well as her husband. She became a famous meteorologist who credited her accuracy to a cowboy who taught me that storms have mothers. Rumble remained anonymous, but he smiled every time she came home from a television interview with stories of saved farms. When they turned 70, a young deaf woman came to the ranch asking to learn Rumble's gift of listening. Rumble said, "I cannot teach you to hear thunder, but I can teach you that silence is the loudest love there is." The young woman stayed for a year and learned to read lips and feel vibrations and trust what she could not hear. She left with a fiancé who had driven her to the ranch and proposed during a thunderstorm on the porch. Rumble watched them leave and took Whisper's hand and said, "We started something. A whole family of silent storm lovers." Whisper typed, "We started a revolution. People who cannot hear are not broken. They are just listening to a different frequency." Rumble's health failed at 82, and the doctor said his heart was simply tired from 60 years of thunder. Whisper never left his hospital bed, and she kept her hand on his throat so she could feel his last words. He said, "The thunder is quiet now. It is letting me go in silence because you taught it that silence is respectful." She felt his words vibrate, and she kissed his forehead and typed on her tablet for him to read one last time. She typed, "You are not dying alone. I am here. I have always been here. I will always be here even when you cannot feel me." Rumble smiled and closed his eyes, and his heart stopped as a gentle rain began to fall outside the window. Whisper felt the rain's vibration through the floor, and she knew it was the thunder saying goodbye in its only gentle voice. She buried him under the cottonwood tree, where they had first sat together during a storm that changed their lives. The gravestone reads, "He heard thunder speak. She heard his heart. Together they proved that love is the only forecast that matters." Whisper survived him by 5 years, and every night she slept on the porch, listening to storms through her bones. When she died, her caretakers found her with a smile and Rumble's photograph and a tablet that had one sentence left. The sentence read, "The thunder says hello. Tell him I am coming." She was buried next to him under the same cottonwood. Every year, deaf couples visit the grave and place their hands on the headstone to feel the names carved in stone. Rumble and Whisper proved that hearing is not about ears, but about the courage to lean into someone else's silence. If you have been told you are crazy or broken or too strange to love, Find someone who will translate your storms into tenderness. Subscribe to Stories Hub Official for more emotional Western romances about the voices we cannot hear and the love that hears them anyway. Share this video with someone whose silence speaks louder than any thunder you have ever ignored.